how Misguided has what seems like a perfectly fine approach to patch content ultimately been
simple.
once rubber hit the road?
They've been making small amounts of low impact additive content. What you want to do is to start make more multiplicative content. Which is my sort of shorthand that's not particularly well defined, but it's the idea of like, here's a storm, and here's a storm, and here's a storm. Now they're green. Here's a dream surge. And to players, it's like, what? What is this? This doesn't feel like a thing. Whereas, horrific visions. Bam, there you go. Thing, cool. And it's kind of weird because I know they've been put off doing, features like that, but your withered training, that's a thing you can go do. If they could start sort of designing those as like little games within games. Brawler's Guild, total redesign. Now it's a game feature, something people can go and do. Archaeology revamp. I kind of start thinking through things like that as being
long-term horizontal progression.
Yeah.
You need a thing you can go do.
Hey, catch up. And here's catch up for your catch up. Because 10.1.5 was catch up gear. 10.1.7 was catch up for our catch up. But also pace so slowly you don't give a shit. Because that's the other thing. They do go turbo conservative on on those things. And I get for them, this is because they have the sort of stratification of the different player types. And their thought is that like, okay, Zaralak will keep someone going for a month and as soon as we can after, we'll have them log in again to do some time rifts and get those cosmetics. And then 2 months later, they'll come back for a dream surge. So I know that's kind of them having different things for different players. But for, I guess, people who just feel hungry to play the whole game, you look at a dream surge and you're like, what? What's here?
Where's the experience like? Where's the...
versus a horrific vision, which, you look at the horrific vision and you're like, shit, man, there's craft here. And I know a lot of people, some people, I loved horrific visions. I really liked them from a design perspective. I know not everybody did. A version of that where it was like you have, say, maybe more like limited lives and no timer. Like, I'd be a bit more okay with that as a sort of solo thing. And I hope it would be like, but then people just wait for their cooldowns. To which I would reply, they could do that. But it would also take them 3 hours to do the dungeon, and that would be boring, which is a pretty strong incentive not to do it that way.
That's their problem. Don't put a leaderboard in it.
Yeah.
Don't say we officially support you doing that dumb shit.
So it is just that kind of thing. Where's the new Mage Tower-like feature? Where's the archaeology revamp?
Where's the Brawlers Guild?
Where's the Brawlers Guild?
The Brawlers Guild is, in essence, perfect. The execution of it over the years has been a little bit hit and miss just because of where it is and it being like invite only in its initial stuff and it taking time to get in.
Heroic time rift. Imagine a heroic time rift and you have to divvy up your raid, and then it was like a little a little thing you could do.
Yeah, or
instead of, because it's like a world, but it's like Blizzard say, and there's a new world boss in this patch. Does everyone go, oh, yippee, a world boss? I'm going to have so much fun with its mechanics and progression. No, to everybody, it's like, this is the pinata that I go to once every week and get sad by. It's not a feature. Because, like, what is all the dev time in a world boss doing? It's just replacing the previous world boss. No one's going there for the gameplay or any of that shit. They're just going there to get their loot. So then that dev time doesn't feel like a feature has been made.
Yeah.
It just, kind of feels like the next loot pinata has been made. Versus if instead of a world boss, they basically added in a trial. A trial as if this was Final Fantasy, and you could do the trial in normal difficulty. A match-made difficulty for the trial, which could be a bit more similar to the current world boss experience. And then you could maybe do a heroic version. And that could just be a thing. Hey gang, we finished Sarkarath. Look, this, micro patch has brought a new whatever boss. And there we go. Do you know what it would be? That would be like, it would be a reason to go back as a raider. And maybe, if they were to do like a mythic, they could have the odd mythic of that's just crazy. And maybe it would get a little bit of buzz from the mythic people of a new thing to go, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to think about like that content diversity. And whenever it feels like a lot of the 0.5 and 0.7 patch content ends up being like, so Scare Vaults, good, because game design was used in them. and they crafted an experience. Time rifts, good for the same reason. You know, your primal storm or your elementalist, whatever, primalist storms and your dream surges, like, kind of less good. So if it just feels like minimum effort purely for the sake of catch-up, to me that starts to feel not worth doing. And it would probably be better if that time went into making something that would stand to the game, rather than just like, you know, you're literally developing a game feature for all of 8 weeks.
That's the big thing where
like Forbidden Reach. How many people, like, we know that team had to go pretty hard to make that happen. And it lasted for 8 weeks. Imagine if the Scara Vaults were designed as more of an evergreen feature that could last the whole expansion, that maybe had some of their own progression, some more unique and exciting rewards. Like, imagine if they took that idea and instead of doing the clear this to get your obsidian whatever annulet thing, imagine if they just kind of tried to make that as like, oh yeah, this thing's been uncovered in the Isles and now it's a thing you can do. And they just tune it to be to be relevant for the whole expansion. It's like that would have, because then we could be talking about that now. Whereas for most people, what does that content give? Some annulet that's been nerfed into oblivion so that no one will want it anyway.
So everything you're saying points towards a very obvious answer, which is literally just horizontal progression systems.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's more or less just, why is the Scara Vaults a patch feature for 10.07? Why is it not an expansion feature that just keeps going? Why is it not like, why are you not 1 second, sorry, there you go. Why
vital hydration emergency?
Why was the annulet in the Scara Vaults not a feature that was going to expand every patch for the every patch for the expansion?
Yeah, and it didn't even need to have been the amulet. You could have done the amulet for then, but what if there was some transmog stuff or whatever? What if there was an aspect of the cavern or maybe another version of the, or because you could have maybe 2 different vault complexes. One of them is puzzles and stuff, the other one is like puzzles and combat. Like one of them is Jungle Run, the other one is Takeshi's Castle.
Yeah,
I don't know why that's where I'm going with this.
That's okay. I'll pretend I understand.
Okay,
yeah.
Jungle Run. It's fun, it's puzzles, but it's a bit softer and it's not going to stress you out, because Jungle Run's a kid's game show, versus Takeshi's Castle, where people are going to get injured and hurt.
You're almost describing torghast right now. That's the secret.
That's the point.
The secret is what we're describing is a better version of torghast and of Warfronts. No one wants to hear that, but it's true, because they were bungled in execution and in how they were tied to progression and how the systems of the expansion, they were so terrified that no one would play them that they went, we have to tie them into the vertical progression. So World of Warcraft has this season, and it's the this is what you're doing, the vertical stuff, right? And everything somehow ties into this, and this is where everything goes wrong.
Push week!
The amulet ties into that, so it becomes super important, and the balance is really important. But instead, if you had the amulet that you only put, now obviously people immediately go, but my bag space, and you go, fuck off. Obviously, it's it's an important thing, but
we have a new character event in the stream, the bag space Italian.
Yeah. So I wasn't intended to be Italian. I don't know what it was. But you have the amulet and you get stronger in this place, and your amulet gets more powerful, gets a lot more powerful, and you have a whole load of progress. In the same way that Horrific Visions had the masks and had the talent tree, the same way the Deaths of Chromie had the talent tree, the same way Torghast had the box. Those are great. They just need to be framed in a way people go, this is a thing I can do that's fun. Because I even know, like, there's a friend of mine has been going back and doing a load of older stuff for achievements and has kind of been enjoying it a little bit. Like Torghast, if you go back and do Torghast, you kind of go, this had promise. Now, the aesthetic of it being, here's the fucking maw, and the maw is disgusting.
I love the maw.
And you're in the maw, and this is the maw, but it's on fire, and this is the maw, but it's more brown than grey. You go, well, that was a clear mistake.
Today's adventure is Jailor's Anus. Fantastic.
More or less. So you have to wonder, what does it look like if you go for a Torghast, but it uses a wide variety of tile sets. You're teleporting all around the place. Maybe even it's attached to time. And you're doing things like in the Deaths of Chromie, and you have all this progression, and you do it consistently, and you get lots of different little bits and bobs here and there. So like, yeah, Baron. So little people know about these things. Like,
oh yeah, that's a Chromie.
yeah, that is now Death Scrummy. You can, if you know what you're doing, you can finish that in a couple hours.
Yeah,
but like,
that's a good couple of hours for some people. That's an indie game.
Exactly, and I guess the way, obviously that makes it a bit more challenging. But your point is you're supposed to build out your MMO as a platform for people to do loads of different things.
Oh my god! As if it's
fucking Roblox, mate.
As if it's some sort of metaverse.
Yeah, exactly. Because it is. Wait. Because it literally is.
No, Matt. As if it's a goddamn theme park. They forgot to put rides in the theme park. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's what's happened.
Yeah.
Instead of putting fun rides into the theme park, we have Disney Genie Plus as our catch-up system. It's like, no, Disney. Stop doing lightning lanes and Genie Plus. Increase your park capacity by building more rides.
Exactly.
This is going to be another intersection into my yes, you know, if you certain people with certain brains have certain things they end up finding as hobbies, such as military history, tanks, and theme parks.
Yeah, so Danerick says Torghast was so much inspired by other games genre that required proper support dev design as another game inside WoW.
Yeah.
And people are bringing up Bosha from FF14, the open world, like had its own progression, had its own lore, had its own story, had its own like gearing, and had its own like mini game items that you use. It drastically changed up and had a raid and like multiple raids at the end of it.
That even the people liked, but then hated, so they didn't do one. But did they like it or did they not? Because I know that community discourse has been messy.
People liked Bosha.
I can see the smile forming in your face when I said that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. People largely liked Bosha. I think there were some fears within and like development time and stuff that ultimately I'm not completely sure, but people liked it for the most part at the time, and I loved it to pieces. It was incredible. But the point that I think I got out of what Danerick said is design. This game needs more designers that are allowed to design, and I hate saying that because I immediately flash back to those, what were the shit were they called, Shards of Domination. And that's yeah. Torghast is a roguelike, and roguelikes have no place in an MMO. Absolutely, categorically untrue. Everything has a place in an MMO because this is supposed to be a wide variety of horizontal progression and people having to play. You're supposed to go and do stuff, and you go, well,
Borg.
A roguelike's not supposed to be an MMO. What were Horrific Visions? What was, what's, I mean, obviously, like, fucking dungeons are half a roguelike if you think about it that way. I'm really playing with the definitions here really badly, but
TB is fucking rotating very quickly in his grave right now.
If we plugged something up to him, I swear we'd get some free power like out of it. But I think I don't mean any disrespect for that. But the design needs to be go and make a game within our game. Yeah, I think that's the way that if you look at how things are actually working now for these monolithic live services that have that approach, that's going to be the one that works. That's also the part that's scalable. Because what's not scalable is going, we have 100 designers. Here's your vertical progression. All of you impact on it. Because then they'll just throw up all over the place. It'll be a nightmare. They'll just constantly like, well, I can't do anything because if I do this on my bit of the monolith, then someone else's monolith will fall over. It's 100 people trying to work on the same Lego tower at the same time. Yeah. Where you go, what if you build a load of different Lego towers?
So there's a
chat. Load of things.
There's an interesting chat me and Colin were having in the office last night. Now, for him, this is from the perspective of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. For me, it's the perspective of WoW as we moved from WoD into Legion and BFA. So, in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you can basically do any of the main provinces or counties or whatever in like whatever order. That being said, they still have their correct historical order. So you could basically do some story over here, take all of your, your character and all your current gear, go over here and effectively travel back in time as you do that content. And it's this thing that's happened in so many games. Sadly, it happened in Assassin's Creed Mirage as well, where you basically, you have the start of your story, you have the end of your story. And the middle is assemble your own story in any order, as we saw in Diablo 4. And I think one of the main things that's driving that, because it's not good for the narrative experience, and everyone may talk about player freedom. It's not about that. It's because then you can fucking split your team up into teams
'Cause you don't
and
have
they
a
can
vision.
work on a thing. See, I wouldn't even say because you don't have a vision. I would say because that's the only way you can have that many people work on the same product.
Then that's fundamentally flawed and needs to change.
Yeah. I mean, I would say so. So thinking about World of Warcraft, it's almost like saying you are now all indie developers. Your game engine is not Unity, it's WoW Edit. Half the developer team has left. No,
Yeah.
I joke, but the Deaths of Chromie felt like somebody building their own little indie game inside World of Warcraft. Horrific Visions felt like somebody built their own indie game inside World of Warcraft. The Treasure Run, the Lei Shen
Trove of the Thunder King.
Trove of the Thunder King. Someone made a little indie game.
Yeah, all of that stuff was good.
Yeah, Metal Gear World of Warcraft. Stop,
Yeah.
let's go. Okay,
Yeah,
maybe
so,
not that.
So what happens if you take that and you push it even further? What happens if you go, this isn't a little patch feature here, this is an expansion feature? Because obviously you look at now, FF's had a little bit of problem with that this time around because of different reward psychologies and like philosophies and stuff. Where the Island Sanctuary didn't pan out super well for a lot of people because they hyper gamed it, and there's a little bit of people concerned about that. But
I think I think there was also an expectations thing. Like some people thought it was going to be a like solo instanced solution to the player housing problem. I don't think it ended up being that.
yeah, not at all. There's a whole like it would take ages to explain everything I know about that, and I only know half it. But there's definitely people want to go and get lost in doing a thing for a while, and that wasn't super possible. Wasn't possible with the variant dungeon. The deep dungeon was kind of the deep dungeons are cool, but there's a little bit of a fundamental design issue, which is the opening of them is boring because it falls into roguelike problems of, oh yeah, you don't get to do the cool or the fun stuff until you've played for ages. So there's a little bit of that going on, but like at least the side content there's Evergreen, whereas WoWs are those little patchy features as opposed to, hey, what is one of the features of this expansion? Because you think about the features that what people really liked, and you go, hey, class halls. And what happened in class order halls?
Oh, it wasn't a feature. It was just an expansion staging ground.
Yeah, but that's the thing where it was a thing where like every time there was a patch, you got more of your class order hall lore. You got more of that. You got your weapon got stronger as you went. And there's a difference between the Heart of Azeroth and the artifact weapon, because the Heart of Azeroth was a generic thing that tied into like your Azerite armor and stuff like that, and it didn't have its own story attached to it. It didn't have its own meaning attached to it. It was just a MacGuffin for the expansion. So if they had done something a little more similar with the to the artifact weapon with that, then it might have worked a little bit better. But that's the thing where I think people will be happier if they went, here's a framing that I understand, and every time I come back, there's more to it. There's more and more and more to it. And I can just, like, I already have the framing, so I don't have to learn to do something new. I get to have more fun than I already have. Especially if it's just like, hey, here's the Deaths of Chromie. And then what happens in the next patch? Deaths of Chromie, Chapter 2. What happens in the next patch? Deaths of Chromie, Chapter 3.
Yeah.
And that itself tells a lot of like small stories that work together. Stuff like that, I think, it's not the answer to everything, because there's 20 like bajillion problems with the game. Obviously, there's a lot going right as well. Not to be a doomer about it. I'm not actually trying to be a doomer at all here. It's just trying to present things that I think people would like. And it's mostly just, okay, well, what if you solve the problem of people not liking all these individual bits of content and not considering them important enough? What if you just put a big spotlight and a big framing and say, this expansion feature is this, and we're going to update it every time we update the game, and you're going to come back in and you're going to fucking like it.
It's like, it doesn't have to be every time. And, there's one thing. I remember them saying if they're going... Did they say they're bringing the Brawlers Guild back? But they basically said, if we bring this back, we'll do so in an evergreen way so we don't have to, like, redo it every time. And then the idea is like, oh, you have the Brawlers Guild. Good, you can keep that going. So it's challenging. Having a bit of a cozy farming game in WoW would be peak.
Half Hill Farm was sick.
Half Hill Farm was pretty sick for the people who liked it. And, you could be like, no, that is fake and gay. I want gear and muscles. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't have to be for you. That's such a straw man. That's such a fucking straw man.
That's a big. That is. You set that thing on fire. You see it from space, dude.
Yeah, there you go. I want boobs and blood. Which is, I don't know, that's 1/3 of the WoW player base. The other third of the WoW player base wants to snuggle up with their Switch and do some farming. So,
Another snuggle, like.
yeah, exactly. They want to play Harvestella. I mean, even take, like, as, you know, me as a player, like, as an example, one of my favorite childhood games is Harvest Moon Friends of Mineral Town. And, like, I would be swapping between Friends of Mineral Town, the Pokemon, Call of Duty, and World of Warcraft, and Total War. There's a lot of different games.
He defies all stereotypes.
Well, that's like, my point is, if we focus so much on gearing as progression, and we focus so much on, like, World of Warcraft is a seasonal game. You know, like, oh, what are you doing this season, bros? As you've been saying, your man who, there's a guy on Twitch and sort of taking the piss out of the Mythic Plussers. He's just like, it's push week! You gotta push!
He's a very toxic individual, very hilarious.
Very funny. Just like, because all these people are like, you know, it's a fucking video game. I'm like, no. This week is important because it's push week. And I can get a higher plus on my Mythic Plus, and this will fulfill my soul.
I mean, if it does, fair enough. Like,
work away. It does, fair enough. But it feels like we've sort of way over-indexed in that. And I don't know if it's a thing of, like, what gets measured gets managed, where, you know, as we make more Mythic Plus and we do the raids and all of that, and we just sort of focus in on that, that just ends up being, like, what the game is now. And then if the content that exists... This is maybe the thing. The content that exists for the people who like world content is just like, and now you can get the watered down, left behind, you can catch up to the push week, bros.
You can drink the runoff that they've left behind, like.
That's it. We will put their gamer piss through a Brita filter and give it to you 2 months late. Dream surges.
Yeah.
That's a little bit mean.
Yeah, I think
versus the different thing then would be like making Half-Hill be a full proper thing, or maybe you would do that, but what you'd actually do maybe in the next expansion you would evergreenify that feature by saying, and here is the Stormwind, Orgrimmar, or maybe Mulgore, whatever farm, and that's just a feature players can do, and who gives a shit if it's instanced in the way that a Garrison Wars, where you can still invite your friend over, whatever. Because for loads of people, that would be enough of the game to play.
Yeah.
So Deaths of Chromie, again, as you said, being able to do Deaths of Chromie Chapter 2, or a new thing. For Warfronts. Imagine if, because like the reason why Warfronts, it's kind of weird. There were times in beta where they were fun. And I remember that, yeah. I remember, was it... Funny, remember when torghast on beta, when it was insane?
The first wave of torghast was so much fun, and every single change made it worse.
Do you know what it reminded me of? Risk of Rain 2.
Yeah.
The only problem, it was basically a Risk of Rain 2 that didn't exponentially scale its numbers at the end, so that you had to become so broken that you could defeat the difficulty being broken. But if they had cracked that, and made it feel like Risk of Rain, I think the conversation would have been quite different.
It would have been extremely different. It's literally the execution, and then they went, we're scared. What if people can't do it? What if people don't like it? Well, everyone has to go in there to farm their soul ash for their legendaries, and I had to go to a dark part of my brain to remember soul ash.
There's got to be like soul ash, like that's exactly what it did to you.
Yeah,
did they name that knowingly? Is someone there just way smarter than we give them credit for?
They were exceedingly thematic in Shadowlands, so they were. They definitely were in like every capacity.
Island Expeditions.
Yeah,
you could have done that in a way that wasn't about Azerite, because the way that they did it was Azerite's the main feature. Random cosmetics are like the backup thing, and I remember the patch they added in the currency. So, so you could get some of those cosmetics. But you just think, like, what if... Because they made all that cool tech for Island Expeditions. Like, I really thought that fighting the enemy NPCs, especially when you didn't turbo outgear it, fighting the enemy NPCs felt really good.
It was pretty good.
I'm not going to sit here and say, like, oh, it brought me back to the days of Classic. But it felt like It felt like that with those NPCs could be the WoW modern version of Classic. Definitely faster and stuff, but what I'm basically referring to is combat where maybe brain turn on sometimes. Big concept. Because think about like half the world bosses right now. Think about like time rifts. Did you ever have to turn your brain on a time rift? No. Whereas in those, like if you were really undergeared in an island expedition, like those enemy NPCs could actually give you a little run for your money. And you would, things would happen such as stunning the healer and that giving you an opening, and you would actually need to stun the healer if you wanted to kill one of the other characters. And that actually, dare I say, this may be horrifying, it may be too much to bear. It kind of started to resemble gameplay.
That's a really interesting one, because a lot of what I mean by them putting design and resources into these side games is to enable some form of gameplay loop where there kind of isn't for, like, this is going to sound insane. There's no gameplay for, like, cool. Just
I have no, what fell?
the atom almost tried to fall, so I will fix that very, very briefly.
So what I think Matt was going to say, that's why I can smoothly pick up, is that there's basically no gameplay in all of WoW outside of Mythic Plus. Okay, when I say gameplay, I maybe mean that in a more traditional sense. Yeah. Because as much as like time rifts, I enjoyed, running around with them, they're cookie clicker. Yeah. Dream Surges are cookie clicker.
Just the same shit over and over again.
Where, yeah, it's not even that, but it's like the output of the mode has so little to do with your input. The only thing that it really, the only thing that matters is your presence, not your input. And I feel like in a video game, your input has got to be a lot more important than your presence.
It's fucking AFK Arena for casuals.
Yeah.
Like, that's... And I'm assuming AFK Arena has some sort of strategy involved.
But look, if you want to... And here's the thing. If you want to take inspiration from an idle game with timers, you can do that. You can do that in your... You can do that in your garrisons with the Fantasy of a mission table. But how about instead of making it just a UI thing, make it feel kind of credible? Like you're actually sending your dudes out to do something.
Yeah.
Make it be like one of those narrative idle games. There was a pretty good one based on Game of Thrones. I think it was on Apple Arcade. If you're going to, say you're going to do AFK Arena or be inspired by something like that. Okay. Think about the auto battlers. Look at Path of Exile 2. Path of Exile. It has an auto battler in its recent season. And like WoW got an auto battler technically in the form of the
Shadowlands mission table.
Shadowlands mission table.
That was really frustrating because I know for a fact someone made that and someone was very happy with it and someone was proud of it and they put a lot of effort in. But whatever scope they were within,
3% battery. I should grab a cable.
Yeah, whatever scope that was actually in ultimately resulted in it not actually feeling like gameplay very much. And because it was tied to people wanting to do it for anima and things like that, it just ended up a load of shite, basically. It ended up being, you get the add-on and you have it calculate because it wasn't framed as like a proper little gameplay mode. It was kind of a side thing. So, but that reminds me of other things in Shadowlands where, well, I'm not a fan of like the Ember Court or whatever else, but the Hall, what was it called? What was the Kyrian one called? The thing that did you'd had the arena fights. That was almost very close. That was almost fantastic. It just wasn't finished and you needed to farm out resources to go in. And that was one of the things that exactly where Shadowlands was awful in so many ways, but it did have a bunch of wins that ended up being framed and being used as losses. Path of Ascension, yeah. It was a Path of Ascension that could have been great and could have been like a stand. Yeah, you've returned to the perfect time.
Stand.
Yeah, so that was something that could have been excellent, could have been fantastic, but ultimately turned out to be another loss because of the framing, because of the way it works, because of how weird it was, because of how it wasn't finished, and the farming to get in. There's a lot of stuff that is there, and obviously look at classic hardcore, you look at classic, well, mostly classic hardcore, you see people do have a hunger for actual gameplay. Now, you could argue separate audiences, but there's no harm in, well, there's obviously it's a risk to take with your designers, but I think it'd be it still isn't finished. Yeah, I know that. I know the only way you can do it is through abusing a bug, which is hilarious. Literally, you can't beat some of the hardest fights without literally abusing a bug. It's impossible.
Fix that?
I don't think so. I don't believe so.
I remember it was straight up the dev left.
Yeah.
And there's no one else in the team seemingly got tasked on fixing it.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of issues there. But I've got a super here that I think is also important to talk about. And that is from Lord Mathis saying, to me, the problem with horizontal features is rewards. Can't be gear or dies after the gear's obsolete. I want to see a torghast bar similar to the trading post with 30 transmogs I can unlock. It's exactly that, where they need to up the reward. And this is where you go, well, you want 30 transmogs you can unlock. And is that you just spamming torghast? Or, is that you doing... Because torghast already has a reward schema for getting, doing harder stuff, especially in the last bits they added. So there's definitely plenty of stuff there, but I think that they need to figure out a way to make that feel like its own little gameplay loop, its own little progression loop. Now, maybe not with different sets of gear, but with things like the Onyx Amulet, things like the Heart of Azeroth, things like a specific weapon. You have a torghast stick, and that torghast stick gets strong as you do torghast and you level it up. And that's something you see and you're proud of and it feels strong and it's there and you go, give me that. Because FF does that with the deep dungeons. You have your Aether Pool weapons, and they a little bit gate your progress because you go in, you get random upgrades as you go through them, and that goes up to 99. So there's a little bit of, what if you just instead of focusing purely on cosmetic rewards for casuals, which is what they largely do, they go, oh well, more mounts, more mogs, more chivos, and that's fine. But where's the actual video game part of it? Now, obviously, there was the box in Torghast. But that was a box. It was just kind of there. And Torghast itself was inherently flawed. So I imagine that fishing artifact from Legion, even the way that they're trying to do that with the profession stuff at the minute, but it's limited by the profession knowledge because it ties into gearing. It ties into actual game. World of Warcraft is a monolithic game with a million different things threaded through it. And that's ultimately where a substantial amount of the actual problem lies. And they should probably focus a little bit on freeing their designers to not have to weave this massive tapestry together. Like I was saying with building, they're all one big massive Lego tower. And the problem with that is that you can't get rewards that feel meaningful because that gear is that. And as soon as you say, well, I'm from this other department, I would like to put this reward on the Lego tower. And then it's unbalanced, it falls over and gets destroyed. And you even see that happening with the core gearing stuff, where someone has a really fascinating idea for a weapon or a trinket, and it flies a little bit too close to the sun, and then the balancer we can't really get this fit within the scheme of things, and then this is the trinket that everyone wants. So you can see they struggle with that already with just what they have. How bad would it be if they had to do this or anything else? Well, so there's so many ways around that.
The thing is, you can think about time rifts and dream surges, and one's kind of replaced the other so quickly, and as a full thing to play, as a feature to play, they both ended up feeling a bit half-baked because of that. Now I like the time rifts a lot more. I did do plenty of them. I picked up a whole bunch of the rewards that I wanted. So for me the time rifts actually did work for 3 weeks, and that's maybe all Blizzard would want. It's did you come back? You played it for 3 weeks. You had a good enough time. Maybe you'll go finish up your unfinished business. That could be good. Dream Surges, I don't think people are doing that with. Nah. But it's even the things that are there, they kind of replace. They just get replaced by each other so quickly. I think about a version of Warfronts that could have been something that would have went the distance. It's
frustrating to me every time because I've been farming out the very slowly and very randomly. I've been farming out the Priestess's Moonsaber, and that requires the 7th Legion service medals, which you get from the Warfronts and from Darkshore and from Arathi. Every time I do a Warfront, I just get annoyed. I'm man, you were cooking here, and then I don't know if you left the pot unattended or if you were told you need to put this out on the plate now, and it was half done. But it was very, very...
No, they were told, here, you've got to serve that to Northern Irish people. It's far too seasoned. Just dunk a few litres of water in there.